Welcome to the Land Your Bet Sports Betting Podcast. Josh Lander, your host as always, and I'm going to be mixing things up a little bit moving forward as it pertains to the NBA. So let's take a look at what you can expect on today's show and what we've got for you moving forward. I'm going to give you that update here to the daily NBA podcast here on LYB, let you know how we're going to be mixing things up and what you can expect on the podcast when we have NBA picks and plays for you guys moving forward. I'm going to have a parlay for the people on this episode for you. It's going to pertain to Monday night slate here on Monday, October the 30th, as I'm recording this for you here, roughly around 4:30 p.m. on the West Coast. So games just kicking off. You won't be able to bet on them unless you watch the Coast to Coast podcast that I'll tell you about in just a minute that I run with my friend and co-host Nate Weitzer. But the parlay for the people is going to be an amalgamation of the best bets that we have on that podcast. So I'm going to make sure to get something out for you each day, even though hopefully you'll have some time to bet on it. I'll be getting these videos out to you a little bit earlier each day than this first one I've got for you. So you can still bet on that parlay if you'd like. But if you do like and subscribe to the page, like this video, subscribe to the overall LYB podcast page here on YouTube. And if you're listening on audio, obviously just go ahead and like the podcast, follow along, rate it if you would as well. And you'll be eligible to go ahead and win the parlay for the people each day as well. So I'll get that out to you for roughly the night ahead. And then we'll go ahead and finish things off here on the podcast with some leans that we have for the following day. So as I said, this is Monday that I'm recording. I'm going to get this out on Monday for you. And this is going to be a look at what I'm going to be looking at as I put together my tickets and my plays for NBA Coast to Coast with my co-host Nate Weitzer, which I'll tell you about here right now, actually. So if you do follow along, thelines.com is the betting network that I contribute heavily to, especially as the main contributor for NBA alongside Nate Weitzer. We're both what you might call the senior contributors to the lines.com when it comes to all things NBA. As if you're following along right now on the YouTube channel, that's where we have those videos up for you every day. If you are listening on audio, they put them out on the podcast form as well for thelines.com. So I do want to push you guys over there so you can make sure you get the actual final picks that we make each and every day that we're doing these videos for you guys. We have two videos. We've got best bets, and we also have our playa props that we're very well known for, as we always have a couple of really nice streaks that we get on when we're talking about the player props, Nate and myself. We get into those things together, but I am also looking at some stuff ahead of time that I'm going to be running through on these types of podcasts with you guys. But if you are following along on the other one already, you're hopefully up 6.85 units if you're betting accordingly to the unit measurements that we give you guys as we lay out those bets for you. The 22-16, I'm fine with the record. Could be better, but it's really just all about the units. So we're making some pretty good money over there. I do want to push you as well onto social media. If you're on Twitter, at JL Boogie, it's Land Your Bets is the name of the account. But at JL Boogie is the handle there if you're looking for it, and at Land Your Bets everywhere else on Instagram and on YouTube. So if you're getting these videos on YouTube, you obviously know that. But go ahead and subscribe to the page for me as well. It definitely helps me out, helps me get these videos out to you guys even more. So the daily plays that I'll be putting out on Twitter and Instagram to a degree, but Instagram's a little bit more, as we know, about engaging content. So it's not as much, it's about the picks, but it's definitely about how you deliver the picks on Instagram. On Twitter, I'm just writing them out nice and easy for you guys. So if you're following along on Twitter at JL Boogie, Land Your Bets, you can make sure to not miss any of these plays. I'm also putting out the link to these coast to coast videos there, so you can make sure that you don't miss those as well. And then lastly, all this stuff's going to be in written form on Monday or Tuesday, as well as Friday. That's when you'll find the biggest NBA slates that will be coming to us this season. It's going to be mostly on those days. You'll get some big Wednesday ones as well, but when Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll have one article on one of those days with roughly 3 player props in there that I'll put together for you guys. And on Friday, when there's always a big slate in the NBA on Fridays, I'll have another props article for you in that one as well. On this podcast, to be more specific about what you can expect on the LYB pod moving forward, every show is going to start with that parlay for the people, as I mentioned. That's a chance for you guys to get in on the action. Think about it kind of like when you're at a blackjack table and you, instead of just tipping the dealer, you put your money in a position to be able to tip the dealer on your winnings as well if you win the hand. That's kind of what the parlay for the people is going to be. I'm going to be putting $20 on it. $10 is for you guys. $10 is for me because I got to make some winnings here as well to keep shelling out money like that. So I'm going to split that with you guys. And if we get the the sweep, what that's going to be, like I said, is going to be the top 3 bets on the Coast to Coast podcast that I like, that I'm putting together into one parlay for you. $20 usually, $10 for me, $10 for you. If you like the video on YouTube and are subscribed to the page, if you like the podcast and are following along on audio, then you are eligible to go ahead and win the money if it hits, which I will go ahead and make sure that I put your guys' name in a randomizer and get it out to the winner each week. How to bet each NBA slate. That's also going to be what I'm talking about here. So that's going to be a lot of what you see when you're on this podcast specifically, as opposed to the Coast to Coast. Think of this as the precursor to the Coast to Coast podcast. I'm doing research at least 24 hours in advance of these slates. Usually, what I mean is 48 hours. Really, I'm trying to get this research done starting the morning of the day before, which is when these lines usually start coming out. Today at around 11 a.m. on the West Coast here is when the lines for the Tuesday night slate started coming out. Obviously, things like back to back and all that will matter, but I'm going to be able to get to the slate early with you guys, put out a video about how I'm betting it, what I'm thinking for moving forward, and then you'll get those actual picks as a result of all this research on the Coast to Coast podcast in audio and also on YouTube as well, both formats. So another thing too that you can expect, especially for those of you on audio who I know can stomach a little bit longer form stuff than maybe some of those of you watching on video, we'll get some guest picks in there. I want to have Kareem K on. He is our residential pro NBA bettor, and I still have him on retainer. So he helped us put together a lot of nice bets for futures in the offseason here before we got into this season. He was on a number of times going through every single team and the bets that he's making in the futures for markets for those guys. And now we're going to go ahead and get him on for some of these slates that he's playing each and every day during the regular season as well. I'll also have Matt Kolsky on. He's someone who I rap about with these picks consistently to sort of run things by him, as he's someone who follows the NBA, former sort of statistician who kept stats for the Warriors for a bit as well. I'll sort of blow up his spot in that sense and say he does have a brain for this stuff. That's why he was paid to do it as such. He's a huge nerd and math head. So we'll have him on to sort of keep me honest, if you will, and I can run these things by someone who is looking at it really through a number standpoint with a little bit of feel and eye for the game in there, but a lot of numbers as well. So that'll be super helpful for us. All right, let's get into that parlay for the people for this first episode, so that if you are following along, you have an opportunity to win this money. Trae Young over 24.5 points. Ausar Thompson over 11.5 rebounds and assists. Derek White over 12.5 points. All three together on FanDuel plus 641 is what that came to. I'm putting $10 on it for you guys, $10 on it for me. So if that does hit for you, someone will be the winner of $64.10 according to our winnings here if the parlay for the people hits. So just another reminder, go ahead and head over to thelines.com, to that YouTube page. That's where Nate and I are providing all these picks for you guys every day, so you can get them as singles, play them as parlays here with me as I'm doing, and we'll make some money together. So a quick aside before we get into it, this is the only time I'm going to make you go through this, I promise, but I do want to, like I said, give you some insight into how I'm finding the bets that I'm making here with you guys alongside Nate. And so the general process can be pretty much broken down into 4 steps. And then it gets a little bit more convoluted and complex once you get in there, but let's keep it pretty simple, especially to start. I'm looking at the injury report. It's the NBA. You guys already know it. You already know that some guys are going to be on there with some weird injuries that might be a little bit suspect, and perhaps should be registered under load management as opposed to the hamstring soreness that random guys might feel. Team and player rest is going to be in there as well. Very similar to injury report from the standpoint that teams will often hide a guy's desire to just not play one night for whatever reason that I'm not going to guess, and they'll hide it behind an injury. So the team and player rest is very similar to the injury report, because you want to know how many minutes guys have played recently. For instance, the Warriors are going to be on a back-to-back as I'm recording this on Monday night against the Pellies, and Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry have all averaged 33 minutes in the first couple games of the season. So it's probable that at least one of them rests in this game. And already on the injury report, Klay Thompson had something where he was doubtful to play because of whatever. So you already know one of them is likely going to miss. Team and player rest and injury report are very relevant, but also the team rest is going to be, are they on a back-to-back? How many games have they played in the last 4 nights to a week, etc.? Have they been away from home and stuff like that? That's going to come also now bleed into the situational analysis, which is like, where is this game? How does this team fare in this situation at home as an underdog with or without a certain player in the lineup? All those things are going to be hyper relevant to the situational analysis. Especially with picking sides. When you're picking props, you use the same type of information, just slightly differently. Last thing here we have is narrative. Narrative is something that I love and I think is going to continue to play a part in the NBA, which is often a petty sport, if you will. It's a sport played by people who can be very petty and diva, if you will. And so some of the narratives come into play, like revenge narratives against your old team, or the fact that this one guy and you are competing for a spot on the All-Star team. They're a direct competitor in the obviously division rivalries come into to play. So there's all types of narratives that need to be considered here for why guys might be more or less motivated to do well in a specific game. And that's going to be huge during an 82 game season where there's just so many ups and downs along the way that kind of keep us rolling. So these are the things I'm going to be looking out for. For today's show, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. It's a small 3-game slate. I'm going to be looking at here, firstly, the Magic and the Clippers, and just showing you a little bit of the stuff that I'm looking at and why I am leaning towards Orlando right now. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see Orlando plus 7.5 is listed as the spread. If I was leaning towards the Clippers, I probably would have said minus 7.5 is where I'm leaning in this one. And I would have wrote Los Angeles Clippers minus 7.5 as opposed to Orlando plus 7.5. You get me. This game is in LA, back-to-back for Orlando, who is going to be playing in the same stadium 2 nights in a row at Crypto.com Arena because they play the Lakers on Monday night, probably tipping within a few hours of when you'll be watching this, or at least as this comes out before, and you can watch this whenever you want. A couple of the other stats that I just put down here, I really do like the against the spread numbers in the NBA because there's just so much that comes into play with public perception, as we know with any sport and with any sports betting industry or market. But in the NBA, I think the home court advantage plays a really, really big part. Especially the inside, it's like playing in a dome in the NFL every time, where noise actually does come into play, impact the sort of energy in the building. And guys also just shoot better on their own court. There is something to a hoop that you practice on, a court that you practice on being advantageous to you. So all those types of things are baked into the number, right? Like the books are looking at the same thing we are with how well they play in certain situations. But here's some of the stuff I'm looking at, and I'll show you how I can try to find some value here and there. And oftentimes the value is on the fact that the book has to move their odds and their lines not entirely, but heavily based on the public perception, how much money is rolling in, who is betting the money, all that type of stuff. Orlando, they are 21-15 against the spread last season as the away underdog. I am going to be using last season's numbers for a little bit here. Probably, I don't know, at least the first 3 weeks into the season, at least that maybe a month or so. I'll still be reverting back to 2022, 2023 data because we don't have enough of a sample size yet in this season to give us information about how a team is going to continue to perform this season. Just enough. I mean, I glance at it. How has this team done over 3 games? First week of the season down. Okay, what do we see from pace? All that type of stuff. But we also know things like pace change as the season wears on and it goes down. Teams with a ton of energy coming out the gate, really eager to play and run up and down the court. We see a really high pace. For instance, right now, Chicago, the Bulls, have the second slowest pace in the league. That is at 97.5. If this was the middle to the end of the season, 97.5 would be towards the middle of the pace that most teams are playing at. You would see some teams down at 95 even. And Chicago might be one of those teams at that point. But right now, a 97 pace as the second slowest in the league is just an indicator for how fast everybody is playing in the league. You take those things into consideration, etc. Orlando on the second leg of this back-to-back did fine on no rest last season, right around 500. I mean, they're a young team. This isn't going to affect them as much. We don't really learn as much from that. We don't really learn as much from the Clippers being 26 and 26 against the spread as favorites, regardless of the situation last season, because they're basically 500 on the road or at home as favorites. And we often saw them not cover these large spreads because their average margin of victory when they're at home as a home favorite is plus 4.2. Yet they're still not covering very often at home because their spreads are so large. They're above 4.5, as we see in this one at 7.5. So we did see, looking into some rest stuff and some injury, Paul George. You always got to watch out for Kawhi and PG and the tricksy Clippers and their lineups and their injury reports, because you never know when one of those two stars is going to sit. PG was already declared as likely to play in this one, which is hilarious that it even needed to be said because he has no injury listed. So they were just basically saying, well, he's going to play because we know that you guys are wondering that, because he often wouldn't play in this scenario last year. So just a quick look at why I'm leaning Orlando plus 7.5. Tune in to the Coast to Coast to see if I am playing that one. And the last one I'll bring up here for you guys is the Spurs. They are playing in Phoenix against the Suns. I already hit this at plus 7.5. It is already down to plus 6.5 as you are listening or watching this video. That is because Bradley Beal and Devin Booker Bradley Beal's not playing. And if you saw a video of him online on Twitter, it didn't look good. I'll put it in the description, but it did not look good, because I think you should see this video that was posted of him and the result of his current back injury that he's still trying to overcome. Back surgery is no joke, and he does not look comfortable shooting a basketball even with nobody on him. So we'll see how long he's going to be out, but he's definitely missing this one, as he's already been ruled out. Devin Booker is doubtful to play, which is good for a not very likely. Like, let's just assume he's not playing as we move forward. And that's what I did. And that's why I hit it at plus 7.5. And I would hit this. Another perk of being able to get these videos out to you early and hopefully have you watch them well in advance of lines moving is you get ahead of early lines that other people aren't going to be hitting, because by the time that they get to them, the lines have moved and adjusted for the fact that now we know Devin Booker isn't playing, or almost definitely not playing in this one. We already know Bradley Beal is not playing. That information came out within an hour, both pieces. So when you have that info at your disposal, you can use it ahead of time when you know that that line is going to be moved as soon as the public and more people pick up on this stuff. Not very many people on a Monday afternoon are looking at Tuesday's slate of games and how that is impacted by injuries and reports coming out about guys not practicing and things like that. If you are, that's where you find value. It's just that simple. So this is a really nice spot for us. The total has been bet down from 232. Another thing that I couldn't even get ahead of with you, because literally as soon as that news came out, that's where it seems the sharps were really putting their money, was, okay, no more Brad Beal, no more Devin Booker. Wonderful. 232 is much too high in a game where there's not going to be quite the same level of offensive potency as you might get with those two guys obviously playing. It's going to be down to KD and the boys to keep things going. So you see that total drop. You see San Antonio show a ton of improvement, in part because Wemby's there, in part because some young guys like Devin Vassell are getting better, if you were watching another episode of this podcast, you know that I bet him for most improved player after watching him play one game. We'll see how that bet pans out, but at 50-1, I thought that was going to drop, and it did drop down to 35-1. It's about where you can get it right now, even 30-1 on some books. So the CLV is in our favor, but you can't feed your kids with CLV. So we'll just hold onto that ticket and hope that we can have him keep playing at a high pace. So I think this is just a good spot for them to take the plus 7.5. Like I said, I'm leaning towards that game. We'll see what it's at by the time I get to the Coast to Coast podcast with you guys on Tuesday morning, when I'll be recording with Nate super early. It might not be there for us anymore. It's not likely that we'll even see 6.5. It's likely we get that down to 5.5, which is usually a basketball number. I'd imagine if it gets down to 4.5, it stays there and then might come back up a little bit. But this is going to probably end around 5.5 and be in that number. We'll see how I did in calling that here, but it was worth it for me at 7.5. I think it's worth it for you at 6.5. And once you get to 5.5 is when I start shying away from this one, because I think that's probably a reasonable spread in this game. So that is all the time I have for you in this one. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you are going to continue to find what I'm going to be putting out there for you helpful, because I am really enjoying the idea of you guys learning with me as we continue to find ways to find value, whether it's through early lines and getting to them before they move, or just simply learning a process together where we really start to hone in on how we're picking props, how we're picking game sides and totals, and then you can use that information for yourself, even when I don't have videos for you. But obviously, we love having you all here as well. So stick around, continue to follow along. Like I said, we'll have that parlay for the people. Let me put it up on the screen for you one more time and let you know, for those of you listening on audio, that it is Trae Young over 24.5 points, Ausar Thompson over 11.5 rebounds and assists combined, and Derek White over 12.5 points. That gets us 6.5-1 almost on our money. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow along, rate the podcast on audio. And if you do, you're eligible to win this money with me. So until I talk to you guys next, happy betting.